We're going to go ahead and back things up. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hey, you cats and kittens. Welcome to the Big Cat. No, just kidding. Movie Bros Podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos and friends to talk about movies, either current or classic. And this week, it counts. It does count. We're going to be talking Tiger King, the new Netflix documentary series. It's basically just one giant documentary split into multiple parts. So that definitely, seems like it fits into the movie category for us. Hopefully you folks will agree. Tiger King has been almost as trending on Twitter as COVID, which is really interesting. So it looks like we've got a bunch of folks who've joined us in the live chat already. Hello, welcome. Before we get into our discussion of Tiger King, let me introduce you to some pretty fantastic gentlemen who are going to help share the load with this podcast with me. Jim Pugliafico is here. Hey, sweetheart. How are you?
Hi, that's me, everybody. Thanks, babe. I'm really excited for this show because, man, this thing has really taken kind of a life of its own, and there's a lot to talk about. So I'm excited to get into it with you guys. And welcome to everybody who's joining us. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And Will Lindis is here with us as well. Will, what's shaking, bacon?
You know what? I'm glad we're here for this week. I'm glad we're here talking about Tiger King. You're right. It's absolutely taken the internet and Twitter and Facebook and everything by storm. It has been just the thing, one of the couple of things that everyone's been talking about. But it's also very welcome. There's a lot going on right now. And I found for myself, it's been like really hard to like just sit down and watch movies, which is weird for me. But like this last week, all I've done is play Animal Crossing and watch Tiger King. And those were the places that I wanted to use as my escape. So I'm glad that we're going to be able to talk about one of those two things today.
I agree. I've been hugely into Animal Crossing as well, and Will, suddenly I'm just envisioning us doing an episode while we're like playing and talking.
Ooh, yeah. We will have conversations about like what's the price of turnips on your island right now, Brad?
Have you seen any stringfish on your island recently, Will?
The correct answer to that is abso-freaking-lutely not. Even after like way too many casts. But
my gosh,
I digress.
Yeah. It's funny because I was working part of the afternoon, and Brad was playing some Animal Crossing in another room, and I could hear him chatting with some of the other folks that are playing, and some of the things I heard, I should have wrote them down because I could have made a post like, okay, my partner's in the other room and I hear him talking to somebody and he's saying things like, do you have coconuts yet? Do you, I caught a red something fish, or like, and I'm like, it's crazy.
What that is Jim, you need to get on this and you need to like make this Twitter account now, and it needs to be called Out of Context Secondhand Animal Crossing.
There you go. You don't have to play.
I will
put the stuff that you hear.
Great idea. Yeah. I'm going to do it.
We had like, you could even join the Discord so you could hear things if you want. We had like 8 people on earlier while we were playing, and it was just like the perfect way outside of podcasting with you guys to just kind of chill out and relax and be social. And we were gabbing, but yeah, I can only imagine what that must have sounded like from the outside.
Look for that Twitter account soon. The random Animal Crossing quotes from my partners. Something like that.
There we go. Well, it's quarantine time, and we're all trying to do fun things to distract us. And Will, I agree with you. Tiger King absolutely qualifies. But we, have to acknowledge that some folks maybe aren't aware of this yet, or they've seen posts online about Tiger King, but they aren't really sure, like, what it is, what it's about. Do they even want to watch it? We are going to talk all about Tiger King on the episode this week, and we're going to be spoiling quite a bit throughout our conversation. So here's the structure I propose. Jim, Will, you let me know if you're on board with that. Jim, we'll have you kind of introduce us to Tiger King. Just tell us a little bit generally about the setup, and then just give us a spoiler warning. That way
Sure.
people can step aside if they need to. Works for Jim. Will, does that work for you?
Absolutely. It's going to be hard to talk about the insanity that's about to ensue without digging into some details. So I think that's a good structure.
And this is one of those shows you could talk about all the spoilers you want, but even when you do, even when you mention the most like outrageous spoiler, people are not going to believe it, and the impact is still going to be felt when they watch the show. I have a feeling that like when they actually see it, they're like, "Oh my god, they said it, but I didn't believe it, and now I'm a believer." Yeah.
Well, I saw somebody on Facebook the other day, like someone had commented like a spoiler from the show, and they're like, "Oh no, that can't be real. You're totally making that shit up." And it's like, well, actually, we just watched that episode over lunch, and that's totally real. So, Jim, there may be some truth to that, but that's what we're going to do. If you have not yet seen Tiger King on Netflix, go ahead, hang out with us for a few more minutes, and we'll give you, just a little bit of a setup, courtesy of Jim, and then we'll warn you before stepping away. But all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of Tiger King. All right, Jim, give us a little basic setup here. What is this Tiger King phenomenon on Netflix all about?
Well, I'll give you a little setup. First of all, I know I did see this on social media, and I just saw it on IMDb that the original title for this is Tiger King: Murder, Mayhem, and Madness. That is the original title, although it's not the official title anymore. So there we go. We've shortened it to Tiger King, and it's become a huge hashtag. Just you'll find it all over the place. So Netflix. This is Netflix's Tiger King. It's a new 7-part documentary expose series about, and each part's about an hour long, a little bit under an hour. It's about a rivalry between big cat eccentrics that takes a dark turn when one of the characters named Joe Exotic, and you're going to remember this name, great name, by the way. He's a controversial animal park owner and manager. He's caught in a murder for hire plot. So there you go. You have a spoiler right in the IMDb description, which IMDb is kind of known for anyway. So this show mixes cults, murder, meth, politics, guns, and fame, and a lot more for a compelling 7 hours of like tragically crazy television viewing, right? Which is what we all need, right? When we're going through a global pandemic and we're all under risk. We need something like that to get our minds off it. For me, I have really mixed feelings about this show. Like, on one hand, like the characters are so colorful and the way they're presented, it's hard not to be swept up in wanting to watch this train wreck of situations unfolding like right in front of your eyes. On the other hand, I think it's a deeply flawed show, in my opinion. And the more I think of it, the more its issues really, really bug me. And we'll get into what those are. So I just kept asking myself if it's possible to be enraged by the show on one hand, but also actually kind of be entertained by it. So there you go. I'm very conflicted. That's my quick take on it. I'm going to let you guys give the rest. Will, Brad, whichever one of you guys wants to step in now, go ahead.
Will, what's your real quick non-spoiler quick take?
Yeah. So if there was going to be just like one word on the back of the box on this one, the label, kind of what you can expect going into this is an absolutely insane set of circumstances, a very bizarre set of characters, almost to the point of, that game. I don't know if you've ever played that game that's like, 2 truths and a lie, and then you and the people have to sort of guess which one thing whacked about you is you're making up. But it's like every single one of these things is a truth that sounds like a lie. I'm with you, Jim. Like, this was long for me. Like, I don't think that I necessarily justified like the 7 episodes. I felt like at about the 5 episode mark, I'm like, okay, I kind of got this now. But all that aside, I mean, it's a fun watch. This is a popcorn watch. This is the type of thing that you watch and then you talk to your friends about, like, oh my fucking God, did you see that? What do you think's happened? And again, I think in a time when we are hungry for any type of social interactions that we can do at arm's reach, I think that's a net positive.
Yeah, I agree. And the flaws I'll talk about. I mean, yeah, I agree, Will. I think this one's a little bit long. I think it kind of hit its peak around episode 4 or 5. So maybe and from there you kind of knew where it was going to go, and felt probably in the last couple episodes a little bit padded out, which is unfortunate. But yeah, Brad, are you going to chime in?
Yeah, I'll chime in a little bit. I'm Brad Exotic.
Oh my God.
I have some thoughts on this documentary.
Oh my God.
Anyway, enough of those shenanigans.
You don't have a baby tiger. I love the glasses, though.
But I have Lion.
You have a baby lion, not too far off from a liger.
Anyway, yeah, I think I agree with you guys. It's interesting that this documentary, like, has gotten the traction that it has. I almost feel like if we were not all quarantined with nothing better to do, this would be one of those things that just like pops up on Netflix and goes away and you never even like think about it or realize it necessarily. But I mean, this has really become a huge phenomenon. And I think, started watching it, not to sound hipstery, but I think we started watching it kind of before you started seeing it everywhere. And like, as we got 2 episodes in, I'm like, is anybody else even watching this? And then it seemed like, boom, total explosion of Tiger King talk. And so watching episode after episode, it was like, this can't get crazier. It can't. Like, it is at peak crazy. And then one more episode in, it's just like the show got in a rocket ship, and that previous crazy line, it like flew over that line into the stratosphere. As it went, it just got crazier. It was really interesting kind of learning all about the big cat trade and this feud between Joe Exotic and Carol Baskin from Big Cat Rescue, who is a very famous figure in the big cat / animal protection world. We'll get into spoilers here in just a little bit, but kind of seeing their dynamic unfold and kind of learning about their history was kind of fascinating to me. Also, like Joe Exotic's different like husbands and polyamory, and there were just so many like unexpected wrinkles and twists in this whole thing that just kind of kept me interested throughout. I will say I agree with folks who say this probably didn't need to be 7 episodes. It probably could have been 5. Some of the material did feel a little bit like a repeat and a little bit like filler. But that said, I enjoyed the cavalcade of people who, lent their voices to telling this overarching story. So I enjoyed watching it. It was a fun diversion. That said, I find it a little troubling in many ways. Some of the things that have happened and probably are continuing to happen with people who think it's a great idea to bring a tiger home and have an exotic pet, in their backyard that is, 500 pounds and eats, 150 pounds of meat every day. So that's a little crazy, but yeah, good stuff for me overall. Rachel in chat says, I'm conflicted as well. It's horrific and hilarious. Rachel, I think if there were like a movie poster quote for Tiger King, that would probably be my pick. You just landed it. That's a really great way of saying it.
Yeah. This almost makes me want to rewatch. I don't know if you. I know you guys have seen it because we've watched it together now. Roar, Tippi Hedren, and and which also I think watching Roar, now knowing the history of it, but kind of knowing what happened afterwards, I think you can also watch that with the tagline of horrific and hilarious. And it also is about big cats. So
Yeah.
So I'm sensing a potential theme night.
So obviously the show being about focuses on the people who have a propensity and are drawn to these big cats, right? That's kind of the basis of what drives these people, even though there's a lot of other things going on. There's profiteering, there's ego stroking, just the search for fame and all that stuff is all kind of tied in here. Anyway, we're going to get into spoilers, but I just want to say how I was drawn to this. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So we're flipping through Netflix for something to watch one night, and I see this come up, and I see the guy's image, and I instantly recognized his image because, full disclosure here, in the past, I have supported Big Cat Rescue down in Florida. That's Carol Baskin's organization. And I get the magazine that they put out like every quarter or whatever. And in there, usually in the back, there's like an update on her effort to put into legislation to make these parks and make these practices illegal. The breeding of tigers for profit and so forth. And his picture has been prominently displayed in that magazine, especially when he was convicted. Right. So we're getting, yeah. Anyway, so when his picture came up, I'm like, I have to watch this. Stop everything right now. We're watching this because I want to see what happens. And so, so that's my background and a disclosure.
If I remember correctly, you left a very important detail out of that, Jim. We had just finished watching The Hunt, and we were like, oh gosh, what did we just watch? Really? And then we fired up Netflix, and we're like, whoa, what is this? Because Joe Exotic looked like he could have come right out of The Hunt. And so we went right into it, and 2 episodes later, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and we're like, oh, okay. Yeah. So definitely, I mean, it kind of sucks you right in. And in response, I think, to what we were saying about Joe Exotic kind of being king of the tiger world, or self-proclaimed king, Daniel in the chat, hey Daniel, welcome, says, hey. I think it's like saying I like chocolate, so I want to be Willy Wonka. And I think that's kind of an apt way of encapsulating Joe Exotic, right? Like, he even changed his name. He had this whole, shtick. He had this whole zoo, and he tried to make himself the Willy Wonka of tigers. Did it go well? Did it not go well? We're going to talk about that right now in spoilers. So if you haven't seen Tiger King yet, we'll give you a few moments to step away, go check out the series if it sounds like something you want to watch, and then maybe come on back, listen to the rest of the episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever way you access podcasts. But spoilers for Tiger King are now officially fair game. I've rambled on enough. I'm sure Will is going to let our folks in the chat know that spoilers are incoming as well. So, guys, where do you even want to start?
Well, I'll start, and I'll say that, all right, I don't consider myself an animal activist. I don't, but I care about animals a lot. And where I have a problem with this show is I think the show totally misses a huge opportunity to say something more pronounced about the treatment of the big cats that these instead of focusing on the larger than life human characters and their antics, the show really doesn't focus or even really have a point about what they're doing with these animals really, and what people who pay to go and have a baby tiger sit with them on a couch, what I mean, are doing to these big cats. And it's absolutely horrific what's happening, and that totally got lost in this. And I read somewhere that I think the filmmakers started out wanting to make something. You guys remember the movie Blackfish, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right.
I think that these filmmakers started out wanting to make something like that, which was a documentary and expose about abuse, in that case, abuse at SeaWorld of these captive killer whales, right? Orca. So, but the show somehow got off the rails and found out that these human characters were maybe going to be much flashier or whatever. And that really enraged me. There were many points where we saw these people, outright abusing the animals, and there was nothing ever said about it. And furthermore, there was nothing said about how the industry feeds on people. Oh, that's a cute tiger cub. I want to have my baby's picture taken with that. Fuels nothing but like a lifetime of misery and abuse of these animals. And that really, Brad will back me up here. At certain points, I would just get angry and say something at the screen like, yeah, why don't you say something about what's really happening here?
Yeah.
And the show just totally missed the point and went off the rails. And that's what I did not like about it.
I think I don't disagree at all, but I also would say that I don't think that's what this show is. Like, I think that the obvious comparison that you want to make, and that I want to make, and that, is to Blackfish, but Netflix has a success ratio with the sensationalistic sort of true crime style popcorn docu-series, where the issues that are sort of like sitting in the background stay in the background while you focus on the wild characters. And so this film was, or this docuseries was never about the tigers. This is a docuseries about Joe Exotic, and it's about Carol Baskin. I mean, think about the Fire Festival docuseries, which we know all about, and we memed the guy who gave blowjobs for water all over the place. And whereas the documentary only scratches the surface on the fact that the people that lived on the island were exploited and put in debt by this thing. Or when you think about probably the most, I think the closest family to to Tiger King is probably Making a Murderer, where we have these over the top characters embroidered in this very scandalous, who did it? Did they do it? I think they did it. And that became the story. And you sort of lose sight of the fact in all of this, oh yeah, someone actually died. An actual murder occurred. And so I was able to watch Tiger King sort of through that lens. I would like to have seen something more about the plight of the big cats. But I also sort of knew a few minutes into this one, this wasn't what it was. The tigers were the setting, the characters were the story.
Well, we say that, and I agree with you to a point, but the show opens up with a shot of the filmmakers going to meet this guy who's dealing in exotic snakes or something. And in the back of his van, he opens up the back of his van on a 90-something degree Florida day. And in the back is a young snow leopard in a cage, smaller than a kitchen chair, right? So, the show seems like it wants to say something about that. It's showing that, and it's saying, "Oh my God, that cat's in there," but then it doesn't. You know what I mean?
I don't know that it wanted to say something about it.
It seemed like it did. Why would it show it and say, "Oh my God, you have that tiger in that van with no air conditioning"? Why would they say that?
But I mean, you're I think where you're coming from is one of the people on screen did say that, right? They were like, "Oh my gosh,
how could filmmaker.
You have right? How could you have a snow leopard in the back of a van when it's 95 degrees outside?" Will, from your point of view, though, you're saying even though that happened, that doesn't necessarily mean the show was trying to make that statement.
Correct. Yeah, because I think that when you look at that scene as just the scene, the same way that you would have seen a 2-minute clip on Facebook or something like that, you can look at just that scene and say oh, this is a terrible thing because of X, Y, and Z. But the way it was presented here was less about, oh man, we've got to do something about this, and more just holy shit, that's a cat. That is a rare leopard. This is a weird thing to see in the back of here.
Mm-hmm.
It's setting you up for the fact that this is a weird, like, modern twisted fairy tale of assorted comic book characters all kind of clashing in this weird trashy setting that they've set up for them. And so I'm with you. I mean, this is not the type of thing that I'm normally drawn to. But I'm also like, I don't necessarily like, it's hard for me to fault the thing for not being the thing that it never wanted to be, or at least it never tries to really present itself as. I would love to see probably the inevitable, I'm sure that there's another documentarian out here who is working on kind of like the big cat rescue side of things, like not the organization, but the actual, like, the plight of the cats.
Mm-hmm.
And because this was popular, you usually see something that is tangentially related get picked up and amplified. So I'm waiting for probably the better documentary that is probably coming on the heels of this one.
Maybe. I mean, to the point of like, how was this series intended, right? To I guess point in its direction. Rachel has something great in the chat here. She says that Howard Baskin did put out a video saying the producers presented it to he and Carol like it was going to be Blackfish for Tigers, and that they were totally duped into what it actually was. So, man, what I wouldn't give to be a fly on the wall during that pitch conversation and know how this was presented to all the different folks that, lent their voice to it. I agree with you, Jim, and I agree with you, Will, and you guys know how it makes me crazy to agree with both of you at the same time when you're on opposite sides of things. I think this series tries to walk the line between, making the plight of the big cats known and kind of shining a light on some of those dark corners, while also knowing that, like, people typically aren't going to tune in for, like, Sarah McLachlan and Shaking Tigers for a 7-part series. So, like, there had to be something more, some kind of, like, human element that you could latch on to. And we have that in Joe Exotic. We have that in Doc Antle. We have that in Jeff, whatever his name was. I mean, we have
Jeff
all
Lowe,
these,
yeah.
Yes, Jeff, all these different people who, the Tigers are the context, right? But the people are almost like the
players.
I don't know, the players, right, in that game. And so for me, the interesting part, was in the people. I don't need a documentary series to tell me that tigers are being abused. I know they're being abused, and that doesn't make it okay. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I understand maybe trying to walk that line, and maybe in focusing on people like Joe Exotic and Jeff Lowe, like, you're getting more people to tune in for the what did Daniel say in chat? The trashumentary train wreck.
Trashumentary,
right?
yeah.
People are tuning in for that, and maybe they're learning about the plight of the tigers. Plight of the tigers that maybe they wouldn't have necessarily known about before. Maybe they wouldn't proactively go out and find Big Cat Rescue and Carol Baskin. But now, because of a trashumentary series on Netflix, right, it's something that's on their radar. Maybe they even decide to donate money. I know several people who are now donating to Big Cat Rescue who weren't before. Yeah. So, Jim, you seem to have a negative reaction to that. Is that a bad thing?
Not a reaction to what you said at all. I agree with 100%. I hope people are out there getting behind other organizations that are for the humane treatment of the animals. Okay. I hope that that's the case. But what I see coming off of this show, especially on social media, is the way the show was spun was like a person, they threw a person like Carol Baskin, who I agree, she definitely has some quirks and some questions behind her and possibly her actions, certainly her actions earlier before Big Cat Rescue, I think. But I just think they kind of threw it all in the mix, and everybody got painted with this, psychopathic, characterization. The most sane person in the show was a character named Josh Dial. I don't know if you saw him. He was the campaign manager for for Joe Exotic's both his presidential and his gubernatorial run.
And, and you had a little bit of a crush on him, right?
I kind of did. He's a handsome guy. He's definitely bearish. I did stalk him a little bit on Facebook. He is on there. I believe he's well, all I'll say is if you want to look him up on Facebook, he seems like an okay guy. I loved what he said. One of the things he said, being probably the only voice of reason and sanity on the show, that I think came across on the show anyway, was when he said at the end, I think he said, we've completely lost sight and lost touch of what really matters here. And that's conservation and protection of the species of this planet. He said that, which was a shock. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I just wish the show had been interested in that. It wasn't. It was interested in the soundbite. I'm glad they portrayed him in that way. Can you imagine, though, being Joe Exotic's campaign manager? I was like, oh my God, you talk about I know it sounds like this character Josh wanted to, learn. He wanted to maybe be a campaign manager. Maybe he saw this as a stepping stone or whatever. But man, you talk about just what's the word I'm looking for? Spin. Man, you got to do a lot of spinning with Joe as your. Go ahead.
You got to look at it as like from his perspective. He ran a successful campaign right out of the gate. Yeah. His candidate did not win, but in that particular election, he got like 20% of the votes, which is probably about 20% more than he should have gotten. So, right. I mean, that's a success. That's a win. That's something you can put on your resume if you're going for. I think the guy said that he was working at the Walmart gun counter, and that was his experience before switching into politics. So that's a pretty good pivot.
Hey, look, it only takes 47% to become president, right? So I did draw some parallels between, oh my God, now I can see how we ended up where we are with whatever's in the White House. If we can get a guy like Joe Exotic 20 votes, it definitely doesn't seem like a huge stretch to get a person like Trump into office. I mean, there you go.
Well, and that's the thing, like subliminal messages, right? Like if you see a guy like Joe Exotic commanding these giant cats who are obeying him, he's got this, what seems to be on the surface, successful business, and he's touting a message that maybe seems to make sense to you. All of those factors. I mean, he was kind of a celebrity. I mean, he was infamous, right, in the community down there. So people knew him. He had name recognition. I've worked in politics in the past, and I absolutely can see how those things cause people to glom onto him. It's especially impressive given that he ran as a libertarian, because that's a pretty big accomplishment as a libertarian. Mm-hmm. But it's also, the flip side of that, Jim, kind of to your point, people tend to latch on to what's popular and what's fun, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to get too deeply into the presidential mess that we're in, but I mean, it makes sense to me that a reality TV star and failed businessman could capture the hearts of some people, leveraging on things like, celebrity and
just, we want somebody, a straight shooter.
Right.
So to speak.
And that's the thing. I think that from this, there's an argument to be made for the fact that, okay, so this Joe Exotic character was maybe not a straight shooter. He was a bullshitter who was very concerned with self-image and would do anything to maintain kind of like the way he wanted to present himself and kind of like his power within the fiefdom, at least as the documentarians present it, But you can definitely see a parallel to the fact that there are people who would find someone who lacks polish but comes across as a straight shooter, I say what I mean type
person
thing.
For the people,
whether or not it's the truth or not, but they can like kind of live in that fantasy of like, well, this person is folksy like me, therefore I want to put behind them.
Right. Plus, add on a country song,
and he makes great videos. Right? I mean, come on,
and you got a package there, right? Like.
And you can tell why, like this is why, Netflix doesn't give a seven episode series on issues. They give a 7 episode issue on characters. And you can tell why they would do that for a character like Joe Exotic, because I mean we've talked about the politics, we've talked about the big cats, country singer, polygamist, libertarian, gay relationships. We've got this assassination plot, this extortion, arson. We've got all of the, like, any one of these is a kind of a juicy story by itself, but when you put them one by one after the other, it's sort of like, I feel like for the last couple of weeks, I've probably been looking at so many exponential growth charts, like on Facebook for other reasons. But I kind of felt like my like quota of craziness was like that watching the show. Like, every scene spawned 2 more weird batshit crazy moments, which would spawn 2 more. And by the end of it, like, I remember thinking at the very end of it, we had gotten what's his name, Doc Antle. Antle isn't, I think, in episode 6 at all. So when he shows up again in episode 7 and they're sort of doing some of the epilogue stuff, I was just like, holy shit, it feels like it's been like weeks since I've seen this guy, and it had been 42 minutes since I had seen him. So much happens in the course of this show.
Yeah, and he was a guy in the show who was, at least he came off to me like a guy who's pretty much doing the exact same thing as Joe Exotic, but he's doing it with more polish, right? And less attention drawing things to him. And he probably has just as crazy a story. I mean, he's got young women, basically a harem of young women, married to a lot of them, I guess, from what I gather from the show. He's doing the exact same things in terms of mistreatment and tiger breeding. I would watch a show about him. I want to see more of an expose type show though about him and what he's doing. That I would love to see, because some of the things that happen in this show are just that happen on camera. I mean, you see, is it Jeff Lowe putting tiger cubs and lion cubs in suitcases to bring on planes, and nothing is said. It's like, oh yeah, I just brought him a suitcase. I brought him my hotel room in Vegas, and we were going to have a party bus where we brought tigers on the party bus with drunk people, and that was insane. And
well, real quick though. Something was said, but I think it's problematic because of the format of this. If this were a documentary film, right, encapsulated in an hour and a half, like everything is all self-contained. But we didn't hear about Jeff Lowe getting arrested for having tiger cubs in suitcases and on a bus until the very last episode of the series,
when he used it as a plea bargain.
Yeah, so it happened. You know what I mean? He got smacked down for it, but we didn't hear about that in the episode it was introduced. So the question for me becomes, is that the show not commenting on it? Or is it like, because it's broken into 7 parts, we just didn't get the commentary till later? Is that less bad? What do you think?
It's the show, because the show is not just like the content, it's also the editing and the presentation of that content. So if you want to make a point in the moment about why something is bad, you cut to someone, and there are no shortage of people willing to talk shit about each other in this cast. So you probably have enough footage of someone saying, yeah, that motherfucker was putting tigers in suitcases. I'm glad they put him in prison. You could have cut to any number of different things in the moment to really hammer that point home. If you don't, it's because it's not the priority. The priority is, look at this. Like, again, it's not about the tigers. This is those scenes were more about showing how he got off on the power of showing off these tigers to people in the hotel. So the fact that they then use it as the coda at the end, there's a little bit of like, as the presenters of the show that, you want to make sure that you cover those bases. But if you don't present it in the moment, it's not your priority. And and so no, I don't think that it was something that they really went in trying to do.
Yeah, but I think you're right, Will. I think we're gonna probably see a documentary at some point about, kind of the real story behind Tiger King or something like that. Will come out eventually. And yeah, like I said, there were parts of the show that absolutely shocked me. There was and this is spoilers. I mean, it's tragic, right? You have the situation with one of Joe Exotic's husbands, who was addicted to drugs at the time and accidentally killed himself almost on camera. And which was kind of right in front of the campaign manager, Josh, on screen. That was heartbreaking. I had, I can't say that the character was that prominent in the series. The husband, what was his name? Travis. But it's still obviously a tragedy, and so you feel for Joe Exotic, you feel for Travis and his issues and how it was allowed to get to that point. There was a fire that destroyed a whole alligator area at the zoo, right? And they kind of glossed over the point that probably every alligator in there was burned alive by this fire that probably was set by someone on the show. Just crazy things. There was a near, Joe Exotic at one point, one of the tigers kind of was either playing or kind of attacked him in the pen while the camera was running. Do you remember that?
Right, yeah. And it's like going after his feet.
My heart was in my throat because I know and when he went for the gun, I'm like, oh my God, please don't show this on camera. I really thought it was going to end up with a dead tiger, or a dead man in there. Right. And oh, what horrible way to show, this, the just grossness of that situation. Just a lot, moment after moment after moment like that on the show was, made it so insane.
And that's the thing. I struggled a little bit with this show because I mentioned earlier that each episode kind of sets a peak of craziness, and then you're like, you can't possibly get crazier, and it of course does. We watch the show what, babe? 1 or 2 episodes a day, and it made me really sad about the world we live in a way. We were kind of glomming onto the show because at first it was kind of a bit of fun escape from what's happening right now. But the more we watched this, the more I was just my God, there are people like this out there right now, probably doing even crazier shit than this. And we're not going to know about it. There's no documentary about them. Right. I don't know. It was a little hard for me, I think, to finish out the series, but I'm kind of a completionist, so I wanted to see the whole thing. But I think I have more questions now than I did before the series started. Daniel in chat mentioned earlier on the question of whether, Carol actually killed her husband. Joe Exotic was, spinning this yarn, question mark, that Carol had a husband previously who disappeared, and there's all this speculation. And my question for you guys is, obviously we have no way of knowing, and we're not able to answer that question, but do you feel like that was a smokescreen from Joe, to take spotlight off of him and what was going on? Or, I mean, how do you feel about him kind of throwing her under the big cat bus?
Well,
so I think with characters like Joe and going back, actually setting that up with kind of your previous point, Brad, which is about how there's actually people like this in the world, and it's sort of like a sad condemnation. I think there is value to be had in programs like this, even if they don't care about the message itself. I think there is value in kind of in whatever you're able to take and learn from something, and your discovery of oh gosh, this is probably more widespread than we're thinking is valuable, even if I don't want to heap that credit on the filmmakers. I heap it on you for wanting to pursue that. But to that point, we don't know. I have not seen any evidence. I am not in the legal profession. I am not a juror. I am not an investigator. And I've also, my only source of any information on here is a documentary which is heavily skewed for sensationalism. So I don't know whether she did it or not. But I do know that Joe is the type of character, and we've seen this type of character a lot in real life, who can both understand that something is a smokescreen and blow it up out of proportion, but also completely believe and love their own brand and be so invested in their own bullshit that it becomes their own reality. And then they boost that up and elevate that, and then they live in that reality. And so I think it's even hard for me to answer the question of, like, was this like a calculated thing that he did to get Carol Baskin, or did he fully believe it? I kind of think that it was both at the same time.
Yeah. I don't agree with any of it, but I totally understand. So here's this guy trying to do what he's doing, which I may or may not agree with. I don't, and he's trying to make money off these at his zoo and make his living and live his life, right, in his libertarian way or whatever. And then you have Carol Baskin, who has a questionable past. Possibly. I mean, she, it was admitted in the show that when she was with her first husband, they did breed cubs for the same purpose that Joe does. So,
and we even saw a tutorial video where she talks about how to care for your at-home exotic tiger pet.
But she ultimately flipped and saw the light eventually, I think, and went toward the rescue refuge for these cats, and that's kind of where she is now. But she's trying to pass legislation to basically destroy his way of life, right? So he is basically on the offensive against her, and he's using everything about her checkered past, the questions about her husband, and other things that he probably made up, for all I know, and even threats, right? To try to discredit her, try to make her go away, get off him so he can continue what he's doing. And that dynamic I understand. So it's hard not to take sides in something like that, but we are here trying to be, impartial. But like I said, I understand the dynamic. I definitely think that he was trying to protect what he had, and he did that by attacking the person who was attacking him. So, or that he felt was attacking him, and that's how it came about.
It's interesting. There's a line from one of the Christopher Nolan Batman movies about, like, if a hero lives long enough, he'll live to become the villain. And Rachel, who I absolutely adore, all the things you're saying in the chat tonight. And that goes for everybody. There's a great conversation happening in the chat right now. We can't always read everything, but Rachel says, I found it interesting that Carol bred and then flipped, while Joe started on the conservationist side and then ended up on the breeding, nasty money making-ish side.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting to think about, like, how you can start on one side of an issue, and then through the context of the landscape and life and choices you make, you're diametrically on the other side of where you started. That's crazy.
Yeah. And identity is a big part of that. I think that Joe, if you're looking at this from, if you're looking at Joe as like a fictional character, the thing that you'd be looking for is, like, what's his fatal flaw? And I think that his fatal flaw is his need to have his name synonymous with greatness within the areas that he occupies. And so because of that, he found there was more fame and prestige and just a place where he can make himself on the raising and selling side of things than he would have on the conservation side of things. And I think Carol, to her point, I think what's really interesting is I think that she probably has the same fatal flaw, again, as presented within this Netflix series, because she has made her identity about being the cat conservationist and all of those different things. So each of them found their different ways in there, but I think they found their identities and they leaned so heavily into those identities that they maybe lost sight of a few things along the way in sort of building themselves up within those areas.
Yeah. And Will, to kind of add on to that point, and also what Rachel is saying, it's almost like if you drill down into these characters, these two in particular, Joe Exotic and Carol Baskin, you almost get to a seed that is almost exactly the same, right? They have the same love, care, and obsession for these animals, big cats. It's just that what they do with that obsession ended up in totally different and in diametric opposition to each other.
Yeah.
And at one point in the show, I kept saying, "Oh my God!" Like near the end, when Joe's zoo was basically collapsing, and he was trying to get rid of the animals because Jeff Lowe was taking over the zoo, and I'm like, why wouldn't he make peace with Carol at that point, maybe, and say, "Hey, I need homes for some of my animals here that I love. Let's bury the hatchet to some degree, and here you go, take care of these, and we'll, I don't know. I thought maybe there was some potential for common ground, but I think over the years, I think that scar tissue between the two was just too thick, and
listen, if someone on a rival podcast had a big jar with a picture of my head in it and was like, I'm going to
shoot a gun at it,
head in a jar, then shot the jar with a gun, I probably would not be inclined to help that person if they came to me and they were like, hey, I lost my house. Can you please give me money and help me?
Mm-hmm. I would see it
at least initially, you know what I mean? Yeah, but there was so much personal bad blood between them at that point. I think that's difficult, but it does raise a great question. Can a worthy cause like this help people to rise above their petty differences and do the right thing for the right reasons?
Yeah.
In this day and age, in this country, I don't think so. Not at large. I would hope so. But the series doesn't give me much hope of that.
Well, and I would say that's something that's probably pretty universal about human nature. I think that when you're an outside party, it's really easy to be able to say, like, this person has these these current goals. This person has these current goals. Therefore, they should work together because they have this. But human beings are messy people. And sometimes this town is never going to be big enough for the both of us, regardless of what we're currently trying to accomplish. I think we see that all of the time. And I think we probably see that sometimes in our own lives. We probably have that coworker who we're trying to accomplish the exact same tasks, but their personality, their motivations, their just way of doing things is always going to be oil to our water. And we're just going to be much better if we can work on our own separate things. Yeah. Certain people can reach across the aisle and work on things, but human beings are messy and they're always going to be messy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's complicated for sure.
All right, fellas. Final thoughts on Tiger King.
I would recommend it as a character study. If you're anything like me, it will both entertain you to some degree and enrage you, or at least it should. I'll say that.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think that if you're the type of person who likes like if you liked watching Leaving Neverland, not because you were concerned about the truth, but you were concerned about the scandal. If you watch Making a Murderer because you want to figure out what happens next, and so that you can figure out whether in your heart of hearts who did it or not. I think that Tiger King is exactly in that same vein, and I think you're going to enjoy it quite a bit. This is a thrill ride forward and back. You're not going to get like the conservation stuff unless you seek it yourself afterwards, and I think that that's a pretty valuable takeaway. But as something to do and to keep you engaged and to keep you sort of binge watching episode to episode, I think this accomplishes what it sets out to do. It gives you those what the fuck moments. It gives you all of the memes for your Facebook.
The tabloid stuff. The tabloid
stuff. It gives you the tabloid stuff. So enjoy it, but just this is definitely this is a fun dish, but it's not necessarily like a nutritious one.
I have just one takeaway from this series, guys. You know what it is?
What?
I think it's got to be that I saw Tiger and Tiger saw man.
Sing it.
Bad country music can apparently solve all ills and snowball people into doing things that they shouldn't normally do. So we need less bad country music and more honest people.
Does it make it better that he did not sing or write any of those songs on the video, or does it make it better thinking that he did? It was not his voice, and it was some band that he conscribed to make some songs about Tiger.
I mean, is that not the most Joe Exotic thing ever?
It is. It's awesome. It's awesome.
It's one giant smoke screen of Joe Exotic. BS. Yeah. Rachel says she needs my album. I don't know about that, Rachel, but love you. Thank you. Listen, Rachel has one final question, and I think it's fitting that we kind of end on that note. She says, where is the line on exploitation for a documentary film? So think about not just Tiger King, but think about Blackfish. Think about any other documentary about animals. Where is that line for you guys?
So there's something that's important to keep in mind about any documentary. And I think because it's a documentary, we as audiences are naturally inclined to think, oh, this is a bunch of true statements. Whereas when I'm watching like a fictional narrative thing, I'm watching something that's made up. But documentaries, any documentarian is going to come at their content, the way it's presented, the way it's shot, who's interviewed, who's not interviewed, what's edited out. Everyone is going to be skewing their content towards some particular angle or another. Some just do it more so than others. And in this particular case, I think that it leans very heavily towards a very specific point of view that is concerned less about kind of facts and more about kind of like the shock and the awe. So when I don't know exactly where the line is, but usually for me, when I can walk away from a documentary and say, I don't think any of these characters were people that I could kind of get behind, when nobody seems that they were in the right because only everybody's faults are presented, I feel that that's usually a pretty good indicator that the filmmakers are more interested in sort of like the shock and awe of the thing than in terms of like following a character through and trying to find some sort of prevailing justice. If for a prevailing justice narrative, we need to find someone who is root forable, we should, and I think that if we were going to pull away from exploitation here, we probably would have had. There were a couple of people with PETA. There were a couple like news anchors who like popped in and did an interview for a second here or there. But I think that if we were going to be kind of like less exploitative, we would have spent more time with those people talking about the issues.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you 100%. I think, and I agree with Rachel. She says at the end of her question there, she said she felt that there was some ick factor associated with this show and took advantage of some of the people. And I would definitely agree with that. I don't think. There were some people here who were presented in a not so great light. Take the other husband. What was his name? not Travis, but was it John?
John Finley.
John,
Yeah.
who I thought was a really good documentary interview. But they did a couple of things in editing that kind of exploited him, I thought, right? He obviously had drug abuse problems at some point. He talked about that. It had affected his teeth, and that was a meme on Twitter too. That became, it became memeable because of the show. There was a specific point in the show where they talked about meth mouth, I think, and then they cut right to him, right, during an interview, smiling.
Big old, yeah.
Yep. He didn't say that. Somebody else said that, so that's kind of the icky stuff. And then, you got to wonder about Travis's family, his mother. I think she probably had a hard life and obviously a hard time losing her son. I just think there was definitely some ick factor all over the place here. Yeah. But on the other hand, I mean, there are people out there who'll say that, anything that comes across as exploitation, unfortunately, there are people out there who will say, these people somehow deserved it. And I don't think this documentary gives us enough to be able to make that judgment of who deserves what. Right? Mm-hmm. We mentioned at the beginning of the show, we're not out there to convict, judge anybody. It's just that's what we got in the show. But Rachel, I think your point is well taken. I think there was certainly plenty of that in the show as well.
Indeed. All right. Well, all of that said, I think that brings us to a roarable close to our discussion of Tiger King. Want to give a big thank you to everybody who was with us in the live chat this week. Rachel, Daniel, Bobby Miller. I mean, it was great conversation happening. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who are going to be joining us on digital tape delay through the magic of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, etc., etc. We love you just as much. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Hope you enjoy the episode. Jim, will, between now and next week, and we'll figure out what we're going to be doing next week, but where can people interact with you online if they want to chat movies or even keep talking Tiger King? Jim?
Find me on Twitter. That's where I like to talk about movies, and I've put quite a few things about Tiger King out there, and I probably will continue as long as I'm thinking about this show. At my Twitter handle, at JJP Out West. Those are my initials, JJP, with the words Out West all together. And then also find me on Facebook. My name's Jim Pugliafico. Find me there.
All right. Excellent. Will, how about you?
Let's see. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at whatever cove. I've been avoiding it because Twitter sucks right now. You can find me though on Facebook. Just look for William Lindis. Just send me a note so I know who you are. You can find me on Letterboxd, where when I'm watching more films, I review everything that I put on there. And you can also find me on the Island of Refuge in Animal Crossing, where I've been spending a lot more of my time.
All right. Excellent. And you can find me on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. I'm the one that likely has some friends in common with you already if you're in the Bear and Chub Chaser community. You can also find me on Letterboxd and Twitter at iBradPro. Would love to talk to you folks. Feel free to reach out. Will, to your point, I'll be on the island of Ryza, the pleasure planet from Star Trek. That is the name of my island. And this idea of like podcasting while we're playing Animal Crossing, I feel like has some potential germination. Mm-hmm. So maybe we'll do a fun like bonus episode. We'll pick an animal movie and talk about it while we're Animal Crossing. Maybe
I would do an island of an animal refuge island in the game, except I'm afraid they'd make a documentary out of me.
My island is called Refuge.
I know, I heard that. It gave me the idea, Will.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, we love and adore you all. Thank you so much. Man, this was episode 360 of the Movie Bears podcast. And believe it or not, we found out recently some shows that kind of helped sparked some ideas in the genesis of our show a little bit have been closing down like crazy lately. And that's a little sad to see, but it makes me very happy that we're still doing our thing. People are still tuning in every week. We received some very nice notes after our episode last week, just thanking us for providing some normalcy, doing our thing every week. We're happy that makes you happy, but also selfishly, Jim, Will, I love that we're still doing this despite all the craziness that's going on, because this is my refuge. So thank you for making the time, guys. Appreciate it.
I've literally only seen Scott for the last several weeks. So being able to get on here, like, I do some online gaming with some friends, but any of those opportunities where we can just have sort of like the normalcy, just the regular of the routine and the socialization that comes with it, even if it's through the screens, like it's so needed right now.
Yeah. And Brad and Will, I want to thank you both, especially you, Brad, for being our fearless leader. Like kind of the driving force behind the podcast, and Will, what you bring also drives us forward. So I'm thankful for both of you.
Well, Jim, you spend a lot of time editing and doing a lot of technical wizardry. Will, you're our website and social media guy. Oh my God, this is becoming a love fest, but that should just show you how much we love each other and how much we love you, our listeners. Daniel says, please keep doing it. So needed in giant caps. Daniel, as long as you folks keep tuning in, we'll keep doing it. We love you all. Thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you all next week. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.